My name is Lucas, and I'm 28. Up until last month, I'd always believed my family dynamic was simply eccentric. A bit off, you could say. Now, I see it for what it truly was. A powder keg, ticking quietly, waiting for the right spark. And that spark? It might have been me. The fuse was lit, as it always seemed to be, at one of our mandatory Friday dinners. You know, the kind where Mom and Dad insist everyone be there, no excuses allowed. My older brother, Ryan, was already settled at the table when I walked in, his face split into a grin wide enough to suggest he'd just hit the lottery. And in a way, he had. That morning, Mom and Dad had surprised him with a hefty down payment for his very first condo. "You've earned it, son," Dad declared, his voice thick with pride, already retelling the story for what must have been the third time that night. You'd think Ryan had personally laid every brick of the place himself, instead of just showing up to sign some papers. I just sat there, quiet, idly swirling my fork to the mashed potatoes, that familiar, unwelcome knot tightening in my stomach. I tell myself I'm not jealous of Ryan. I really do try. But I'd be a liar if I pretended it didn't sting just a little. I've been working since I was 17, put myself through college for my own degree, and even helped Mom and Dad with their mortgage when things got tight a couple years back. But on that particular night, it felt like none of that ever counted for anything. Dinner was nearly over when Dad's fork clinked loudly against his plate, making me jump. It sounded like he was about to make a grand toast. Instead, his gaze fixed on me, and he uttered words that still echo in my ears. "You're not half the man your brother is." I don't know what truly snapped inside me then. Perhaps it was the accumulation of years spent being measured against Ryan, always coming up short. Or maybe I was just utterly exhausted from swallowing my anger. But I pushed my chair back, the scrape loud in the sudden quiet, and said, my voice eerily calm, "Then he can start paying your rent." The room went dead silent. Ryan's triumphant grin faltered, replaced by a confused frown. Mom turned visibly pale, blinking as if she hadn't heard me correctly. "Rent?" she whispered, her voice fragile. "What rent?" My heart hammered against my ribs, but I just sat there, watching them, letting the weight of what I just revealed settle over the table like a thick, heavy fog. No one spoke for what felt like an eternity. And in that suffocating quiet, I realized I had just cracked open a secret I'd never, ever intended to share. That was the night everything truly began to unravel. The silence after my comment was deafening. I could practically hear the kitchen clock ticking, the low hum of the refrigerator, even the awkward little cough Ryan let out. I didn't back down. My words hung in the air, a stubborn plume of smoke. Dad was the first to break it, his voice hard, carefully controlled. "Lucas," he said, "what exactly do you mean by that?" I shrugged, trying to project a calm I didn't feel, my hands damp with sweat under the table. "Exactly what it sounds like," I replied. "For the last 3 years, I've been covering part of the mortgage here." Ryan frowned, looking as bewildered as if I'd suddenly started speaking in a foreign language. "Your mortgage? Wait, what? Why would you do that?" Mom looked almost offended, as if I'd falsely accused her. "We never asked you to," she quickly interjected. "We would never ask that of you." I almost laughed, because technically she was right. They hadn't asked. They'd begged. 3 years ago, Dad lost a major client at his contracting business. I'd gotten a panic call late one night, Mom on the other end, asking if I could spot them enough to cover the monthly payment so they didn't lose the house. At the time, I didn't hesitate. I was living frugally, saving up for my own place, but I told myself family comes first. Only, it didn't stop at 1 month, or 3. Before I knew it, I was sending them a fixed amount every single month. They always promised to pay me back someday, but someday never came. It became expected, like clockwork. I opened my mouth to explain all of that, to lay it all out, but Dad cut me off. "This is highly inappropriate," he said, his tone thick with a feigned authority. "Whatever help you've given us in the past was appreciated, but throwing it in our faces now is completely uncalled for." That hit a nerve. I hadn't planned on confronting them tonight, but now that the truth was out, I wasn't about to let them sweep it back under the rug. "I'm not throwing it in your face," I said quietly, my voice barely a whisper. I'm pointing out that I've been helping keep this house afloat, while Ryan gets rewarded for what exactly? Ryan bristled, his face reddening. Excuse me? I work for my condo. Lucas. I've been killing myself at my job for the past 2 years. I almost rolled my eyes. Yeah, your job at Dad's company, where you get promoted every 6 months just for showing up, must be exhausting. Enough. Dad barked, slamming his hands on the table. The sound made Mom jump. You will not disrespect your brother at this table. Disrespect. That word always seemed to get thrown at me. I took a slow, deliberate breath. I'm not disrespecting him, I said, my voice gaining strength. I'm asking why my support is invisible, why I'm treated like the backup plan, while Ryan is a golden child. Mom's face softened, a flicker of pity in her eyes. Lucas, you've always been so sensitive, she said gently, as if that was supposed to make me feel better. You know we love you just as much. But Ryan has been working towards something big. He's making a name for himself. That was the precise moment I realized this wasn't really about money. It was about perception. No matter what I did, no matter how much I gave, it would never measure up to Ryan's achievements. Because theirs were visible. Mine were quiet, unspoken. The conversation fizzled out after that, but the tension in the room was so thick I could barely breathe. I excused myself early, claiming I had work to finish at home, and left before dessert was even served. Driving back to my apartment, I kept replaying the scene over and over in my head. My father's words, "You're not half the man your brother is," gnawed at me. Was that really how they saw me? As half? Over the next few weeks, the dynamic only got worse. The following Friday dinner, Mom acted like nothing had happened. But I noticed she'd set Ryan at the head of the table, where Dad usually sat, like he was some kind of patriarch. Dad spent most of the meal talking about Ryan's upcoming promotion and how proud he was to see him taking the reins at the company. I stayed quiet that night, just observing. Every time I tried to contribute something to conversation, Dad found a way to redirect it back to Ryan's achievements. One night, when Ryan casually mentioned he was thinking of buying a new car, a fully loaded SUV, Mom turned to me with that sweet, subtly cutting tone she used when she wanted to make a point. Lucas, maybe you can help him research good financing options. You're so good with numbers. I felt my jaw tighten. Sure, I said flatly. As long as he doesn't need me to make the payments, too. The room went still for a moment, and Mom gave me a sharp look. That was uncalled for, she said, but I didn't apologize. I was done apologizing for speaking the truth. Then came the final straw. One Saturday afternoon, Dad called me and asked if I could swing by the house. When I got there, I found him and Ryan in the living room, looking uncharacteristically serious. Mom was sitting stiffly on the couch, her hands clasped tightly. What's going on? I asked, my stomach sinking with a familiar dread. Dad cleared his throat. Your brother has a great opportunity right now, he began. He's looking at expanding his condo into a 2-bedroom, so he can rent out part of it. It's an investment. I crossed my arms, a cynical smirk playing on my lips. And what does that have to do with me? Mom offered me a hopeful smile. We thought maybe you could help with the down payment, she said softly, as if she were asking me to water the plants while they were on vacation. I actually laughed out loud. You've got to be kidding me. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. It's not charity, Lucas. You'd be helping both of us. I could even pay you back once I start renting it out. I stared at them, stunned. You want me to fund your second property when I don't even own one myself? Dad's expression hardened. This is about family, he said, his voice firm. You've been in a position to help before. You're single. You have no kids. And you make good money. It's time to step up again. Something in me snapped right then. I didn't yell, but my voice was cold enough to make Mom flinch. I've been stepping up for 3 years. I've been paying part of your mortgage. I've been sacrificing my own goals so you don't lose this house. And now you want me to bankroll Ryan's real estate ventures. No one said anything. I turned toward the door. I think we're done here, I said, my voice shaking, partly from anger, partly from a sudden, dizzying relief. As I walked out, I could hear Mom calling after me. But I didn't stop. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I stared at my bank statements. All the money I'd sent them over the years, all the savings I could have had by now. And for what? A pat on the head, and a lecture about how I'd never measure up. For the first time, I started to wonder if I was done helping them entirely. And that was when the idea for my next move started to take shape. 3 days after that confrontation, I got a call from Mom early in the morning. Her voice was unusually cheerful, almost rehearsed, and that immediately put me on edge. "Lucas," she said, "can you stop by the house tonight? Your father and I want to have a family dinner. Ryan will be here, too. It's important." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, to protect my sanity and keep my distance, but a smaller part of me was curious. Maybe they wanted to apologize. Maybe, for once, they had realized how out of line they'd been. Against my better judgment, I agreed. When I pulled into the driveway that evening, the house looked the same as always, but there was a strange tension in the air, like the moments before a thunderstorm. I stepped inside and immediately noticed that Ryan was already there, lounging on the couch with a smug little smile. Mom greeted me with a hug that felt more like a peace offering than genuine warmth. Dinner was awkwardly quiet at first, until Dad cleared his throat and said, "Lucas, we've been thinking about what you said the other day about the mortgage and about fairness." I sat up straighter, cautiously optimistic. Dad continued, "You've been very generous these past few years, and we do appreciate that. But we also need to think about the future, our future, and this house." The way he said "this house" made me freeze. "What about the house?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mom exchanged a quick, loaded glance with Dad before speaking. "We've decided to add Ryan to the deed." It took me a second to fully process that. "Add Ryan to the deed?" I repeated slowly, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Yes," Dad said matter-of-factly. "He's going to inherit the house one day anyway. But this way he can start taking some responsibility for it now. He can build equity." I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. "So, let me get this straight," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I've been helping you pay for this house for 3 years, and your solution is to make Ryan a co-owner." Mom looked uncomfortable, but Dad didn't flinch. "Ryan is the one who's going to keep the family legacy alive. You've made it clear you want your own place someday. This is what makes sense." I stared at them in disbelief. "You didn't even ask me." I said, the unfairness a bitter pill. "We didn't need to," Dad replied, dismissively. "You said yourself you were just helping. Help is an ownership." That word, help asterisk, stung worse than I expected. I had sacrificed vacations, nights out, even the idea of buying a home of my own, all so they could keep this house. And now, they were cutting me out completely, as if I'd never contributed at all. I turned to Ryan, who was suddenly very interested in his plate of food. "You knew about this, didn't you?" He hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Dad told me last week. I didn't think it was a big deal." "Not a big deal?" I repeated, my voice rising, the anger finally breaking through. "Ryan, this house wouldn't even still be here if I hadn't been covering part of the payments. You wouldn't have anything to inherit if it weren't for me." Ryan had the audacity to shrug. "Look, Lucas, you chose to do that. Nobody forced you. If it bothers you that much, maybe you should stop paying." The casual way he said it, like my contributions were just some hobby I could drop, made my blood boil. I pushed my chair back and stood, the legs scraping loudly across the floor. "You know what? Fine. Consider this my last payment." Dad's jaw tightened. "Lucas, no. I interrupted, my voice firm, resolute. "I'm done. If Ryan is going to be on the deed, then he can be the one to keep this place afloat. I'm not your safety net anymore." Mom looked panicked. "Lucas, you can't just pull out now. We're still paying off the loan." "That's not my problem anymore," I said, a cold certainty settling over me. "You wanted to make Ryan the man of the house. Congratulations. He can have the whole thing." I turned to leave, but Dad's voice stopped me cold. "If you walk out that door, don't expect to come back when things go south." I froze, my hand on the doorknob. That was it. That was the moment everything inside me hardened. He wasn't just taking my contributions for granted. He was threatening me with exile if I didn't keep playing their game. Slowly, I turned back to face him. Things already went south, Dad. I said quietly, a bitter truth in my voice. You just didn't notice until now. Then I walked out, slamming the door behind me. I drove aimlessly for over an hour, my thoughts racing, a whirlwind of hurt and fury. I had trusted them, supported them, believed we were working together as a family, and in return, they had effectively cut me out of the picture, handing everything I had helped pay for to my brother. When I finally got back to my apartment, I pulled out a folder where I kept all my bank records and receipts. Every transfer I'd ever made to their account was right there, neatly documented. I stared at the numbers, the thousands of dollars that had gone to them, and felt a strange calm settle over me. They thought I was just going to slink away quietly. They thought they could rewrite history and pretend I never contributed. But they were wrong. This was no longer about fairness. It was about making sure they could never ignore me or my contributions again. And that was the moment I stopped being the peacekeeper in the family and started thinking like someone who had nothing left to lose. That night was the first time in years I didn't sleep at all. I lay on my couch staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every conversation, every dinner, every moment I'd chosen to put my family's needs ahead of my own. It all seemed so painfully obvious now. The little comments, the way they praised Ryan for every small accomplishment, but treated mine like background noise. How had I ignored it for so long? By morning, I felt hollow, not angry, just emptied out. I skipped work that day and sat in silence with a mug of coffee that went cold on the table. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a message from Mom. "Lucas, can we talk? This is a misunderstanding. Please don't make this harder than it has to be." I didn't reply. I wasn't ready. The next few days blurred together. I went to work, came home, and sat in my apartment without turning on the lights. It felt like I was mourning something. Not just my relationship with my family, but the illusion I had been living under for years. I kept asking myself the same question. If they could betray me so easily, had they ever really seen me as part of the family at all? Friday rolled around, and for the first time in years, I didn't go to family dinner. Around 7 p.m., my phone lit up with call after call. From Mom, then Dad, then Ryan. I let them all go to voicemail. When I finally checked the messages, they were a mix of guilt trips and veiled threats. Mom's voice was soft, pleading, "Lucas, honey, you can't just cut us off like this. We're family. We need to figure this out." Dad's message was harder, colder. "You're acting childish. Ryan has stepped up, and you should be happy for him. If you keep this up, you'll regret it." Ryan's was the worst, casual, almost smug. "Dude, this is getting out of hand. Just let it go. It's not that deep. I'll make sure to toast you when I get the keys to the house." I threw my phone across the couch and buried my face in my hands. I had given everything I could to these people, and now they were mocking me for walking away. That weekend, I started pulling my life back, piece by painful piece. I canceled the automatic transfer that had been going to their mortgage account every month. I called my bank and redirected that money into a separate savings account, one that no one but me had access to. For the first time in years, I started to think about what I actually wanted. Not what would make my parents happy. Not what would make Ryan proud of me. But what I wanted. At first, I didn't have an answer. I just knew I needed space. Over the next couple of weeks, I went low contact with my family. I stopped answering calls and only replied to texts if they were about something urgent. My parents didn't take it well. Mom sent me long, emotional messages about how she couldn't sleep at night, knowing we were fighting. Dad's messages got shorter and angrier, accusing me of abandoning them. One night, I came home to find an envelope taped to my door. Inside was a letter in Dad's handwriting, formal and cold. He wrote that since I had chosen to withdraw financial support, they were considering other options for the future of the house, and that I shouldn't expect to be included in those discussions going forward. I sat on the floor of my apartment, reading that letter over and over until my hands were shaking. It wasn't just about money anymore. This was personal. They were cutting me out completely, not just from the house, but from the family decisions. And yet, as much as it hurt, part of me felt strangely free. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living for their approval. I started going on long walks after work just to clear my head. Sometimes I'd end up downtown, standing in front of apartment buildings I used to dream about living in. I'd imagine what it would be like to have a place of my own, one that no one could take away from me or hold over my head. One night, after a particularly long walk, I went home and opened my laptop. I started looking at condos for sale. Not seriously at first, just browsing. But as I scrolled, I felt something shift inside me. Asterisk, why not me? Why shouldn't I have a place of my own? Asterisk, I have been quietly saving for years, even with the mortgage payments I've been making for my parents. Now that I wasn't sending them money anymore, I could build that savings faster. That night, I built a spreadsheet with all my expenses, savings, and potential timelines for buying a place. I hadn't felt that focused in months. But even as I planned the future, the bitterness stayed with me. Every time I saw my family's name pop up on my phone, it was like a reminder of how little they thought of me. Then came the real gut punch. A few weeks later, I got a text from a mutual family friend, Mrs. Jensen, our old neighbor from across the street. She sent me a photo of a congratulations banner hanging on my parents' front porch with a message. So excited for Ryan. Heard the house is officially in his name now. I just sat there staring at my phone. Numb, they had gone through with it. They'd actually put Ryan on the deed, and no one had told me. Not a call, not a text, nothing. I realized then that there was no going back. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was a severing. They had rewritten our family story so that I was just extra. That night, I poured myself a drink, sat at my kitchen table, and stared at the stack of bank statements and receipts I'd been keeping. My entire contribution to that house, right there in black and white. And that was when a different kind of plan started to form. Not just to build my own life, but to make sure they could never brush aside what I had done for them. It wasn't about yelling or fighting anymore. It was about letting the truth speak for itself and watching what happened when everyone saw it. The morning after I saw that photo of the congratulations banner, something inside me clicked. The pain was still there, but it felt sharper now, more focused. I wasn't just drifting anymore. I had a purpose. For the first time in weeks, I woke up early, showered, and actually felt like I had energy. I made myself a proper breakfast, not just stale cereal or cold coffee, and opened my laptop. My spreadsheet was still sitting there from the night I'd started planning. I stared at it for a long moment, then added a new column, projected timeline. I wasn't going to just dream about a place of my own anymore. I was going to make it happen. I started small. I called a few real estate agents and asked questions about the market. I met with a mortgage advisor at my bank to see how much I could actually afford. It felt strange at first, taking steps towards something that was just for me, but every conversation made me feel more in control. Work became a distraction, but also an advantage. I started volunteering for extra projects, staying late when I needed to, and putting myself forward for responsibilities I used to shy away from. My boss noticed, and within 2 months, I got a raise, a modest one, but enough to bump my savings plan forward by a few months. I didn't tell my family about any of this. In fact, I was speaking to them less and less. The silence was liberating. Without the constant drip of criticism or comparisons, I could actually hear my own thoughts for once, but they weren't staying quiet. Every now and then, I get a text from Mom, sometimes apologetic, sometimes passive-aggressive. "Lucas, you're really hurting your father. Can't we just put this behind us?" Other times, it was Dad, more direct. "You're being stubborn. We did what we thought was best. You should be proud of your brother, not resentful." I never replied. I wasn't ready to engage. Instead, I poured my energy into building myself up. I picked up a side hustle doing freelance financial consulting, something I'd always been good at, but never had time for before. It was slow at first, a client here, a client there, but word started to spread. Within 3 months, I had regular weekend work that nearly doubled my income. And then came the turning point. One of my freelance clients, a small tech startup, asked me if I consider coming on as their full-time financial analyst. It was a risk. They were young, not as established as my current company, but they offered me a salary nearly 40% higher than what I was making, plus equity in the company. I said yes. The day I handed my resignation at my old job, I felt a rush of freedom I can't even put into words. I wasn't just leaving a job. I was leaving behind a version of myself that had stayed small and quiet to keep everyone else comfortable. With my new salary and side hustle income, my savings grew faster than I thought possible. Within 6 months, I was sitting across from a realtor, signing papers for my very first condo, a sleek, modern one-bedroom downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the skyline. When I got the keys, I just stood in the empty space for a long time, soaking it in. No one had helped me get there. No one could claim ownership over it. This was mine, completely and entirely. I moved in on a Saturday and spent the whole weekend unpacking, hanging shelves, arranging furniture exactly how I wanted it. There was something deeply healing about setting up a space that no one else had a say in. Of course, my family eventually found out. It started with Ryan, who somehow saw a photo I posted on social media, just a casual shot of view from my balcony. His text came 5 minutes later. "Whoa, nice place. Didn't know you were house hunting." I ignored him. A day later, Mom called. When I didn't answer, she left a voicemail. "Lucas, why didn't you tell us? We would have loved to help you move in. Your father feels very hurt that you kept this a secret." I listened to the message twice, then deleted it, because the truth was, it wasn't a secret. They just weren't entitled to know. Over the next few weeks, I focused on settling into my new life. My work at the startup was challenging but exciting, and the company was growing fast. I was part of something that mattered, and for once, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Every night when I came home, I'd look around at my condo and feel that same quiet satisfaction. The same walls they once told me I'd never be able to afford were now mine. Not because someone handed them to me, but because I had fought tooth and nail to build this life. But even as I thrived, the bitterness didn't go away. If anything, it sharpened, because I knew what my family was still telling everyone, that Ryan had saved the family home, that he was the one who had stepped up when times were hard. My contributions were invisible, erased, and that burned. One night, I sat at my dining table with that same stack of bank statements and receipts in front of me. Every month, every payment, every dollar I had sacrificed for that house. I spread them out across the table, running my fingers over the numbers. And that's when the idea fully formed. Not just to tell the truth, but to show it. If they wanted to pretend I had done nothing, I was going to make it impossible for anyone to believe that. And when the time came, I wasn't going to raise my voice. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to let the facts speak for themselves and watch as everything they had built on lies came crashing down. By the time spring rolled around, I had turned my condo into a home. Not just a place to sleep, but a space that felt like a reflection of me. I had a proper office corner with a sleek desk and a whiteboard where I tracked my goals. My fridge wasn't empty anymore, and my bank account looked healthier than it ever had. Life was good, but that stack of receipts stayed on my dining table like a quiet reminder that I wasn't finished. I started thinking more deliberately about how, when, and where to reveal the truth about everything I had done for my parents' house. I didn't want a shouting match in their kitchen. I didn't want a private confrontation they could sweep under the rug. I wanted everyone, the entire family, maybe even their friends, to see who had actually kept that house standing. That's when fate handed me the perfect setup. One afternoon, I got a call from my cousin Sarah, who I'd always been close with. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "Hey, just so you know, your parents are throwing a family appreciation dinner next month. They sent invites to everyone." I frowned. "Family appreciation?" "Yeah," Sarah said, her tone dry, from the way they worded it. "It sounds like they're planning to make a big deal about how Ryan has been taking care of the family legacy." I felt my stomach tighten. "You're kidding." "I wish I was," she said. "They even asked me to make a little slideshow of photos of the house over the years. They want to show how much it means to the family." I thanked her for the heads up, But after I hung up, I just sat there staring at my phone. A public dinner with everyone there to celebrate Ryan for doing the thing I had been doing quietly for years. It was infuriating and perfect. That night, I started organizing my documents. I scanned every bank statement, every wire transfer confirmation, every note from my parents thanking me for helping out just this once. I put them in chronological order, creating a clear timeline of exactly how much money I had put into that house and when. But I didn't stop there. Through my work in finance, I had access to software that allowed me to build professional-level financial reports. I spent an entire weekend compiling everything into a single polished document: charts, graphs, annotations. At the end, I added a summary page. Total contributions to family home, 2019 to 2023, $68,450. Seeing a number like that, bold and undeniable, made me sit back in my chair and exhale. No more minimizing what I had done. No more letting them rewrite history. But there was one more piece I needed. Through Sarah, I found out the dinner was going to be at a local event hall, a semi-formal thing with a rented projector and microphone. That gave me an idea. I reached out to Sarah and cautiously asked if she could share the slideshow file with me, just to look over. She didn't ask questions. She sent it over that night. I opened the file and scrolled through the slides. They were simple photos of the house from different years, family pictures on the porch, captions about memories made here. The last slide said in bold letters, "Thank you, Ryan, for preserving our family home." I stared at that slide for a long time. Then I copied the entire presentation and started making my own version. Same photos, same captions, but at the end, instead of that line about Ryan, I added a new set of slides. My financial report condensed into a clean, easy-to-read format. I made sure every transfer had a date and a brief description. I included the total amount in massive font on the last slide with one line beneath it. "This is who kept the house alive." When I was done, I exported the file and saved it in 3 different places: on my laptop, on a flash drive, and in cloud storage. I wasn't going to risk losing it. The more I worked on this, the calmer I felt. It wasn't about revenge anymore. Or maybe it still was, but in a way that felt precise, controlled. At work, things were also looking up. Our startup had just landed a major client, which meant my stock options were suddenly worth a lot more. For the first time, I was in a position where my financial stability didn't feel fragile. I could walk into that dinner completely unshaken. The weeks leading up to the event were strangely quiet. My parents didn't reach out much, though Mom did send a polite formal invitation via text. "Lucas, we'd love for you to join us for this special evening. It would mean a lot to the family." I replied simply, "I'll be there." I didn't tell them anything else. The night of the dinner arrived, and I dressed carefully. Nothing flashy, but sharp enough to make an impression. When I walked into the event hall, I immediately noticed the way heads turned. Some relatives smiled and waved, surprised to see me after months of distance. Ryan spotted me across the room and raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything. Mom came over, hugged me tightly, and whispered, "I'm so glad you came." I just smiled politely. Wouldn't miss it. The evening started with small talk, food, and wine. The atmosphere was warm, celebratory. I stayed quiet, waiting. Finally, after dinner, Dad stood up and tapped the microphone. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began. "This house has been the cornerstone of our family for decades, and we wanted to take a moment to recognize the person who has worked so hard to preserve it." Ryan shifted in his chair, already smiling like he knew what was coming. And with that, Dad said proudly, "Let's look back on some of the memories we've made over the years." The lights dimmed, and the slideshow began to play on the screen. I sat there, my heart pounding, my hand resting casually on the flash drive in my pocket. My moment was coming. The slideshow played just as I expected. Cozy photos of the house through the years. Shots of Ryan helping Dad fix a fence. Family dinners on the porch. Christmas mornings by the fireplace. I could hear murmurs of nostalgia ripple through the crowd. Mom dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Ryan looked like he was soaking in applause at an award ceremony. And then came the final slide. Thank you, Ryan, for preserving our family home. The room erupted in polite applause. Dad put a hand on Ryan's shoulder proudly, and Ryan actually stood up and gave a little wave as if he'd just been handed the key to the city. I let the clapping die down before I stood. If I could have a moment, I said, my voice calm but carrying. The room quieted, and Dad looked confused. Lucas, this isn't really the time. It'll just take a minute, I said. Since we're talking about preserving the house, I thought it might be a good time to share something important. Before anyone could stop me, I walked the projector, plugged in my flash drive, and clicked to the next slide. My slide. The screen lit up with the title page. Financial Contributions to the Family Home 2019 to 2023. Murmurs started around the room. I clicked again. The next slide showed the first year, a neat list of monthly transfers, dates, and amounts. Some were small, others were large, but the pattern was undeniable. Each one labeled mortgage support. 3 years ago, I began keeping my voice steady. Mom and Dad called me one night and said they were in danger of losing the house. I sent money to cover that month's payment, and then the next month and the next. For 3 years, I contributed to keep this place standing. Click. Another year appeared on the screen. The numbers grew larger. This isn't to brag. I continued, scanning the room. I never told anyone because I thought we were all in this together. I thought we were a family. But when I found out that Ryan was added to the deed without so much as a conversation, I realized that history was about to be rewritten, and I wasn't going to let that happen. Click. The third year appeared, ending with a bold total, $68,450. The room went completely silent. No forks clinking, no whispers, just the sound of projector fan humming. This, I said, pointing at the screen, is what really preserved the house. I let that sink in for a long moment before clicking to the last slide. It was a photo of the house taken last summer with the caption, "This was my contribution. Don't forget it." I stepped back on the projector, my heart pounding, but my face calm. The silence stretched until Sarah, my cousin, let out a low whistle. "Wow," she said softly. I had no idea. That broke the tension. A few other relatives started murmuring, looking at each other, some even turning toward my parents with raised eyebrows. Mom looked pale, her mouth open, but no words came out. Dad's face was tight, his jaw working like he was chewing gravel. Ryan, for once, didn't look smug. He looked profoundly uncomfortable. "Lucas," Mom finally said, her voice shaky. This was not the place. "Actually," I interrupted gently, "this is exactly the place. You wanted everyone here to celebrate Ryan's part in saving the house. I just thought they deserved to know the whole story." Dad stood, his face red. "You're trying to humiliate us." I shook my head. "No, I'm telling the truth. If the truth is humiliating, that's not on me." The room went quiet again. My aunt cleared her throat. "Well," she said carefully, "I think we can all agree Lucas deserves some recognition for what he's done." A few people nodded. Someone even started clapping quietly until Dad shot them a glare. I didn't wait for permission. I unplugged my flash drive, slipped it back in my pocket, and said, "That's all I wanted to say. Please enjoy the rest of your evening." Then I sat back down, calm as ever, while the rest of the room buzzed with whispers. From that point on, the entire energy of the dinner shifted. Conversations were hushed, pointed. I caught more than one relative glancing at my parents with looks that ranged from shocked to disappointed. Mom barely touched her plate after that. Dad didn't say another word for the rest of the night. Ryan tried to joke it off once, muttering something about, "Well, guess you were the secret landlord all along." But no one laughed. I stayed until dessert was served, then stood and thanked everyone for coming before quietly heading out. Walking to my car, I felt lighter than I had in months. It wasn't joy, not exactly. It was clarity. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't begged. I hadn't tried to convince them of anything. I had simply laid out the truth and let everyone see it. And judging by the looks on my parents' faces as I left, the truth had landed harder than any argument ever could. But as I drove home, a new question formed in my mind, one that made me grip the wheel a little tighter. What would they do now that they have been exposed? The fallout started almost immediately. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a string of texts from Mom. Long paragraphs that swung wildly between guilt, anger, and self-pity. Lucas, what you did last night was cruel. You blindsided us in front of everyone. 2 minutes later, another message. But maybe we deserved it. I didn't realize how much you'd been giving. I should have thanked you sooner. And then, almost as if she couldn't stop herself, but you could have come to us privately. Now everyone is talking about us. Your father hasn't slept all night. I didn't reply. I wasn't ready to get pulled back into their narrative. By noon, Dad called. I let it go to voicemail, then listened as he spoke, his tone clipped. You've embarrassed this family, Lucas. People are calling us asking questions. You made it sound like we forced you to pay when you volunteered. That was your choice. He paused, and for the first time, I heard a crack in his voice. I don't know who you're trying to hurt, but you've hurt your mother deeply. If that was your goal, congratulations. I deleted the message without saving it. Later that afternoon, Sarah called me. You have no idea what a stir you caused last night, she said, trying not to laugh. Half the relatives are furious at your parents. The other half are calling you the unsung hero of the family. Aunt Linda said it was the first time she's ever seen your dad look speechless. I chuckled a little, surprised at how good that felt to hear. I didn't do it for them, I said. I just wanted the truth out. Well, Sarah said, you got it out, and now no one can pretend they don't know. For the next week, there was radio silence from my parents. Then, on Friday evening, I got a knock on my condo door. When I opened it, Dad was standing there looking older than I'd ever seen him. Mom was behind him, her hands clasped together. Lucas, Dad said, his voice low, can we come in? I stepped aside and let them in, keeping my face neutral. They didn't sit right away. Mom looked around the condo, taking in the clean, minimalist space. You've done well for yourself, she said quietly. Thanks, I said, still standing. Dad finally spoke. I owe you an apology, he said, each word slow and deliberate. I didn't realize how much resentment had built up. I thought we were all doing our part. But you did more than anyone, and I minimized it. That was wrong. Mom nodded quickly. We should have talked to you before adding Ryan to the deed. It wasn't fair. We assumed you didn't care about the house. I exhaled slowly, letting their words hang there for a moment before replying. It's not about the house, I said. It's about respect. I was there for you when things were hard, and you acted like it never happened. You made me feel invisible. Dad looked down at the floor. You're right, he admitted. We were wrong. I don't expect you to forgive us right away, but I wanted you to hear it from me. We know what you did for us, and we won't forget it. Mom took a step closer. Your father and I talked. We want to add you to the deed, too. It's the least we can do. I shook my head. I don't want it, I said simply. They both looked surprised. I have my own place now, my own life. That house was my responsibility for a long time, but it's not anymore. You can keep it. Give it to Ryan. Do whatever you want with it. I'm done tying myself to something that only brought me grief. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Lucas, I'm not saying this to hurt you. I interrupted gently. I'm saying it because I'm finally free, and I want to keep it that way. There was a long silence. Dad finally nodded once. If that's what you want, he said. It is. They stayed a few more minutes, awkwardly trying to make small talk, but the energy had shifted. When they finally left, Mom hugged me a little too long and whispered, I'm proud of you. For the first time in years, I actually believed her. When the door closed behind them, I stood there for a moment, staring out at the city skyline through my window. I hadn't just exposed the truth. I had forced them to see me, really see me, for the first time. And now, for the first time in my life, I wasn't living in the shadow of my family's approval. I was standing on my own, completely and unapologetically, and I knew deep down that they would never underestimate me again. Then I turned off the lights, sat on my balcony with a drink in hand, and let the quiet wash over me. Not the heavy silence of being ignored, but the peaceful kind that comes after a storm has passed. because this time, the house wasn't my burden anymore. It was theirs, and I smiled.